In the beginning, in the time before time, there was nothing. There was only silence. But then something changed. A presence, a vibration, an awareness, a consciousness. Suddenly, something was moving in the universe, and in perceiving that movement, we came into existence. This idea is something that we might very simply call a drone, a cyclical movement that we can orient ourselves against. And in this case, it's so low that depending on how you're listening to this, you might not even hear it. So what we want is we want to add maybe some harmonics. Just a little bit. This is our starting point. Now we added a little bit of movement. So that now this drone, this collection of harmonics, they're shifting a little bit. And we're going to tease this out to make a whole universe out of this with constant movement and shifting, right? And it comes from nothing. It comes from essentially a drone. It comes from essentially a sine wave. Now, if you've been watching previous videos, you've seen me go into feedback an awful lot. And feedback is where you just take any signal and you use it to influence itself in a runaway process that leads to all sorts of crazy essential and minimalist textures. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to use roar, and we're going to drive our signal a bit. Okay, you see what's happening now? Yes. Okay, so now let's let this roar unit feed back onto itself. You hear the movements in the sound? Let's have that happen automatically with an LFO. So this LFO, nice and slow, will affect the time. Okay, do you hear how much movement there is already in this sound? Let's start adding in proper distortion. Ooh. Incredible. Let's have LFO2 affect the speed of LFO1. Okay. Now we've created something kind of wild, kind of shifting, kind of all over the place, and I'm constantly holding down a note. Let's just draw it in, huh? So let's cut away drastically in the frequencies using something called the slink filter. I am in Mordio's studio right now, so he'll endorse this very much. Slink filter is a filter that's essentially doing this. It's like a many bands filter, right? And so it's kind of based on a liquid. So you get these kind of waves going up and down. Let's also move it from left to right, so that it comes in and out. And now let's maybe add in a touch of delay. Maybe a touch of reverb. And now let's go back to the source of the feedback and start playing around again. And now you're going to say, but Oscar, what's the point of all of this? The point of all of this is that we have created a whole sound world from nothing, using almost nothing. A small initial movement, which is that sine wave that we used at the beginning, is now creating all these different swirls and textural effects. And it feels very alive. And so if we put something like a functional groove under there, then we're creating a minimalist techno composition from almost nothing. See how these layers moving over the top of a stable techno groove can keep things interesting for super long. And if at some point you want to do a little break, maybe you'll do it like this. Let's also add in some sidechain compression. See it ducking here. Let's add in some actual compression. This is a sweet spot for sure. Sweet. There is a story behind this video idea, and it's about the artist called Alva Noto. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a pretty big deal. He's like a pioneer in electronic minimalist music, I would say. His label is called Noton, and on that label you'll have many of the most iconic contemporary experimental electronic music artists on there. And I got to see Alva Noto this weekend at an event called Strom, curated by Stefan Goldman in the Philharmonic Orchestra location here in Berlin. So that means that it's like a sit-down electronic music concert. And at the front there's Alva Noto playing or performing electronic music live. And one of the processes that he did to start one of his compositions was he would have these big resonant metal objects that would vibrate very low frequencies, and he would just hold that in front of the microphone, and that would kickstart this sort of feedback process of beautiful drones where the harmonics are shifting within the drone and things are moving. There's so much information in a beautiful minimalist sense without layering random musical elements on top of one another. Is like really taking one vibration and sort of making it as interesting as possible just from a single movement. And that's this approach to minimalism is absolutely beautiful and inspiring. And so what we're doing today is basically setting a loop in motion, which is just this very low sub frequency, adding in a little bit of movement to it, and then using feedback to sort of amplify that and push it further out of balance so that it creates these shimmering patterns that move against each other. That's basically the idea. And then I'm just sort of adding a techno groove underneath, of course, just so that we can vibe with it together. But you could take this process even further and make even more stripped down sound art. I'm just trying to get you thinking in this direction, this idea of a very simple, essential element, and then give that the space that it deserves, rather than layering many different random musical elements on top of one another and then wondering, why is it not beautiful? Well, maybe you need to do almost nothing and give that the space that it deserves to be interesting, because almost nothing, but still something, can be very interesting for a long time if you respect the subtleties and the nuances within it. So the core idea is do more with less. This is one of the textures that resulted from that process. And this is a different one that resulted from the same process. how all these layers interact with each other will depend on the subtle settings of everything, so you have to experiment with that. And using modulation, like LFOs within it, it's a great idea to add further movements. Like in this one, for example, let me move some of the parameters around. Whoa. We're ending somewhere completely different. Still interesting though. Yeah, interesting. Oh, those little flutters that come over the top. Yeah, it's essentially watching the mathematics of the universe unfold onto itself, which is a beautiful thing. And for the 5 philosophy nerds that are in my audience, I would like you to Google the difference between Apollonian and Dionysian music. Watching the mathematics of the universe unfolding against itself is a very Apollonian concept of music. I'm not going to explain that further today because we've all got important things to do. We have our life to lead. Leave me a comment and tell me you want to hear more about this, or just say something nice to me. If you like the way I teach, maybe go follow one of my courses. Thanks again to Mordio for letting me film this last video inside his studio. Like the video, subscribe, and until next time, stay producing, be good to each other, and take care. Bye-bye.